you can take pills, natural or otherwise. You can eat a really healthy diet. You can do all of those things, and those things will all get you back to neutral. All the things will kind of like calm the anxiety down and get you to a neutral point. But if you actually want to be happy, which I think ultimately that's what people want in their life, you can't be happy if the primary narrative in your mind is negative.
Hello, and welcome to the Connect podcast. This show is all about helping you connect to your soul's calling so you can take action on it. Because the sweetest success is a blend of discovering your purpose with the inner drive to bring it to life. I'm Sheila Botello, health coach, lifestyle entrepreneur, and mom of two, best known for my online wellness programs, mentoring, and self-love passion. Listen in for inspiring interviews, solo chats, and Q&A sessions that will move you past overwhelm towards what lights you up. Stop accepting good enough and go for your version of great in your health, business, and relationships. Let's get started. Welcome to the podcast. I'm happy to introduce you to today's interview guest. After years of living with high-functioning anxiety, Dr. Ellen Wong eventually reached a tipping point after 2 hospitalizations related to burning out. Although she appeared like she had it all together, she secretly lived with never-ending mental chatter that left her feeling overwhelmed, anxious, exhausted, and unhappy. Realizing this was not how she wanted to spend the rest of her life, she set out to learn how to stop overthinking and reframe her negative thought patterns. She even traveled to the happiest countries on earth to learn about happiness. Now, as a naturopathic doctor, a self-talk transformologist, and founder of The Joy Avenue, Ellen works with women who are tired of feeling anxious and overwhelmed and guides them towards feeling calm and confident. But what she's most passionate about is helping women prioritize their health and happiness as much as their success. You'll gain so many actionable ideas on how to ease overwhelm and start living with more joy in this episode. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Ellen. It is great to finally connect.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I love the work that you're doing to help women with high-functioning anxiety to prioritize health and happiness as much as success. So good. Please share some of your background, where you were born and raised, and what brought you into the work you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. So, I was I was born in Hong Kong. I came here to Toronto when I was really, really young. So pretty much for all intents and purposes, immersed in Canadian culture, grew up here, and yeah, kind of like I always knew I was interested in medicine. I always knew that I wanted to work with people, and lots of different kind of turns and twists and all this kind of stuff, but ended up finally not deciding to pursue conventional medicine, but wanted to pursue naturopathic medicine. And one of the really big reasons why I wanted to do that was because I really loved some of the philosophies in naturopathic medicine about how really combining biology and psychology, which is what my background was in university. And so I appreciated that from I went into naturopathic medicine in 2005. I think it's 2005 I started. And at that point, I mean, that's a long time ago, but at that point, it was one of the fewer medical professions that understood or appreciated the holistic approach to health, at least in a way that I wanted to work with. And even just now we're kind of seeing conventional medicine talk a lot more about how stress can affect a lot of different things and conditions in our life, but it's still kind of not fully there yet. At least that's my experience. And so one of the things that I really liked about naturopathic medicine was how there was a lot of integration between biology and psychology, like how the way we think, the stress we experience has a huge role to play in almost every condition that we experience. And that was something that I was really drawn to. And so, I graduated. It was just kind of a lot of stuff happening at one time, but I graduated from the naturopathic college. I was hired right away to become kind of like what we call a resident, but it's kind of like a trainee faculty kind of thing. So, I stayed on there, and just kind of within that time period, I was going through a lot of personal changes, relationship issues, family problems. It just kind of all accumulated into me, I think, at that point, not realizing, but that was probably when I started developing high functioning anxiety. I didn't know that's what it was called because it's not even really it's not really a diagnosis, which, we can talk about in a little bit, but that was kind of when I hit a bunch of uh, really kind of events that happened in my life that made me realize that there was something really, really wrong and I definitely needed help. The thing that confused me at that time was that I didn't fit the typical anxiety, um, like that kind of textbook anxiety case. The difference being, and I think this is where high functioning anxiety comes in, is that the anxiety, instead of preventing me from doing things, it actually made me accelerate and do more. And so it was almost like my way of coping with the anxiety was to do more and more and more and more and more. And there's a lot of interesting cycles that kind of come into this and how it comes into play. But I basically used work to cope with my anxiety. Basically, is kind of how it happened. I ended up burning out. I was in the hospital, and throughout that time, I had used a lot of things that I learned in naturopathic college, and they honestly helped me quite a bit. I definitely took the anti-anxiety medications because they were offered to me from like a pharmaceutical point of view. It wasn't, it like really didn't help me the way I wanted it to help me. I don't know if that like explains it well, but I felt like physically okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like physically my heart stopped racing and like feel like, the sweating and all that kind of stuff. But internally, I still wasn't okay. Like it wasn't doing it. So I didn't stay on the anti-anxiety medication for too long. I tried a lot of naturopathic things. I cleaned up, I was really, really diligent with my diet and exercising and meditating and journaling and like all the things that we're supposed to do. But because with high functioning anxiety, what you end up doing is, even if those individual things are good things, the anxiety pushes you to do those ones more and perfectly too. So then my quote unquote self care became a problem because then I was like, oh, I have to eat everything diligently and perfectly. I have to exercise perfectly. And I have to I got to like schedule in my time for self care, and I have to meditate and I have to journal. And it just kind of even that got out of hand. And eventually what I realized, like it took me several years, but eventually I came to the conclusion that all of my behaviors and choices and all that kind of stuff came down to my negative self-talk. Like the negative self-talk was associated even with the self-care. So, needing to do everything perfectly is a sort of it is a negative self-talk, and people don't recognize that, but needing to do something perfectly usually is driven by a belief that you have to be perfect or else you're not worthy, or I have to be perfect or else what would other people think of me, or if I didn't do this perfectly and I went back and told my doctor, what would they think of me? Like there's always something behind it. And what I ended up realizing was that all of this was being driven by my negative self-talk. And then I went on a deep dive in terms of how to work with that, because I think, I've said this before on social media, but you can take pills, natural or otherwise. You can eat a really healthy diet. You can do all of those things, and those things will all get you back to neutral. Like all the things will kind of like calm the anxiety down and get you to a neutral point. But if you actually want to be happy, which I think ultimately that's what people want in their life, no matter which angle they're coming in from, you can't be happy if the primary narrative in your mind is negative.
Wow.
And you cannot take a pill or eat a diet or exercise your way out of that. Right? Like no pill will change the thoughts that go through your mind. No diet will change the thoughts that go through your mind.
I totally agree with you. all of us have this, whether it's learned or it's just been embodied from looking around at society, it can feel very easy to fall into that. I'm
Mhm.
so curious for listeners who are probably identifying with this. I know there's parts of my life that felt
Mhm.
like that as well. But the fact that you have named it and gone to the root is so powerful. Where did that
Mhm.
come from?
I'm of two beliefs. From a nurture perspective, we learn a lot of this from the people around us that have influence in how we shape our thoughts from a very young age. And this is not to say like I'm a new mom, so like heaven forbid anybody say that moms aren't trying their best, or like it's not that you purposely do this, but it's actually embedded in so many things that we do. And it's something that I'm really cognizant. I mean, she's only 15 months, so she is not understanding what I'm saying. But it's just, well, I mean, she is to some extent, but like it's just, I'll give you a great example. If you're good, Santa will bring you toys. So we now have grown up with, I have to be good to be rewarded. What does being good mean? Typically, that being good means I have to listen to my parents
Mhm.
and do what they ask me to. Now, in all fairness, what you're asking your child to do may actually be a good thing. It may genuinely be something that's good for them to learn, or maybe it's chores. Like, I don't know what it is, but like it may actually be a good thing. But the embedded message is you will get a gift, a reward if you are good. Now, there are some environments that will support this to a certain extent, and then the child will outgrow it and learn that they can question things and they can learn that whatever. Most of us, however, go through this now. You keep adding layers and layers and layers to that. And it's like, oh, if I listen to the authority,
Mhm.
then I will get a reward. Therefore, I cannot speak up, or I cannot say no, or I cannot do whatever. And you just kind of add layers and layers and layers and layers, right? So that's from like a nurture perspective. From a nature perspective, there's some evidence that's being shown now that our emotions and our negative thoughts can be passed on from generation to generation. So there's something called epigenetics, which is basically saying how things are passed from generation to generation. Now, we used to always think these were physical things, like physical traits. But what we're starting to realize is that stress can affect certain expressions of our DNA, and that can get passed on from generation to generation,
Oh,
which
yeah. So
actually
much.
means, yeah, our negative thought patterns, our emotions, these can all be potentially embedded and passed on from generation to generation. And then there might be an event that flips that on. So it could be like, it doesn't even matter. There could be just any kind of trigger. And then suddenly, the fact that you are more prone to feeling anxious because of epigenetics, it suddenly gets flipped on and now you're anxious, whatever that trigger is. And that's very different for different people. So, yeah, to answer your question, like I think there's two sides to this and why people develop this kind of negative self talk.
Oh, yeah. And you talk about epigenetics, and for women living in a patriarchy, there's a lot that our ancestors have had to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
My goodness, to be able to do anything, have various rights and freedoms. It's
Mm-hmm.
not that long ago where we didn't have
No.
that even here. And so
Mm-hmm.
the cultural dynamics added into that, you think
Mm-hmm.
about so many different
Mm-hmm.
things. It only stands to reason that we are kind of living it forward. And so
Mm-hmm.
it almost makes us require that nurture portion of the sequence to be even more prioritized, to
Mm-hmm.
really put things out on the table and talk about everything and talk about the worthiness of our children is inherent, and that they are
Mm-hmm.
amazing and beautiful and 100% worthy of everything right now without having done a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole being good, etc. Well, we have certain goals for our life, we have certain ways we hope to show up in the world, and we hope our children will show up in the world. However, letting them know it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay
Mm-hmm.
to not be perfect,
Mm-hmm.
because it's perfect is not even a real thing, even in
Mm-hmm.
nature.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, it's also different and beautiful and varied. And that's where the beauty is. So we need to be able
Mm-hmm.
to celebrate that. I love that
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about this. And I've been watching on your Instagram feed some of the posts that you have about being a new mother, and the beauty
Mm-hmm.
of that, the fact that, you love it. And you also share that, it's not always rosy And hey,
Oh,
as a mom of
no.
two boys, no, it's not always rosy. Even as amazing as my kids are, we have days where things just don't go as planned.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So, so you have one daughter, is that right? One
Mm-hmm.
daughter. And what's one of the biggest lessons that you've learned about yourself since becoming a mother?
I am very good at organizing and planning. I was that person that could organize almost everything into a spreadsheet or a document, and everything is planned out, and not in a way that I'm not flexible. Like, I'm quite adaptable if things come up. But what I realized was that my adaptability and my flexibility still, like, I always knew I could come back to it. Like,
Mhm.
if I had like a day plan, and again, like I do productivity coaching with people, so I have the ability to plan my day to be very productive. If that gets derailed because a friend needs my help or something comes up, I'm fine with derailing because that's important. But I always knew I could come back.
Mhm.
With my daughter, what I realized the entire year of my mat leave was that I never knew when I could come back. I
Mhm.
never knew. Like, I have no guarantees that if today is a bad day, tomorrow will be a good enough day that I can catch up. I have
Mhm.
no guarantees. And if she's going through teething, who knows how long that's going to go. And so, even more so, I have been challenged with not being able to be as productive as I used to be, no matter how much I try. And honestly, like, you've raised a great day to like bring this up. Last night she woke up and cried for 2.5 hours for absolutely no reason.
Oh,
I'm sure she had a reason. She couldn't tell
yeah.
me what the reason was, and I didn't know what it was. And so, like, the day today, I'm tired. Like, we I had planned things I needed to do this morning, and then because she probably didn't sleep well last night, she was extra cranky this morning, which meant I needed to be there with her.
Mhm.
And I have no guarantee that this afternoon I'll be able to catch up. I don't even have a guarantee I can catch up tomorrow. And so the that kind of the productivity to me is still tied to self-worth. Most of us, especially busy women, tie our output to our worth.
Mhm.
And for some reason, being a mom, just the output somehow feels not the same, even though it's probably above and beyond work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that is still something I need to work on. Like, it's frustrating, it's upsetting. This weekend I actually was sharing with my husband how, like, I don't actually know how to come to terms with, or I'm recognizing that I need to come to terms with the fact that I need to drop some of the stuff that I'm doing in order to stay sane, for
Mhm.
starters, but
Mhm.
then also honestly be there with my daughter the way I want to be,
Yeah.
because it suddenly hit me this weekend that my husband has been taking care of her 90% of the time because I've been so busy this last month.
Mhm.
And when I take a look at what I'm doing, I'm like, well, what do I drop? Like, everything is mid, I don't know what the word is. Mid launch is not the right word, but like, there's like things happening and I'm midway through everything. So do I drop it? Like, Joy Avenue is going through a website revamp. Do I drop that? Like, I've paid someone to help me do this. So do I just tell them I'm putting them on hold? Like, I don't actually know which thing I'm supposed to drop, right? Like, there's the website, there's a course that I'm launching that's midway being done. My naturopathic website is being revamped as well. And then I teach at the naturopathic college, and then there's deadlines, there's students waiting for me to get things done. So then I just looked at my husband and I'm like, I don't know what thing I'm supposed to drop.
Mhm.
And even that makes me feel bad because I have to feel like I'm dropping something. Like, even the language around that, it's like I'm dropping the ball. Well, I'm not really dropping the ball. I probably just put too much on my plate to begin with, and then everything just kind of all happened into this 1 month. And and Elise is going through a phase right now where she just needs more attention. So
Mhm.
it's this whole. I'm taking a very long time to answer your question, I'm realizing, but
No, this is great. This is so great because people need to hear, even professionals in this space helping other people through their various
Mm-hmm.
challenges have their own challenges they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure many people can hear themselves in your story, and just the point that we can't really schedule a child's emotions. Like we realize this only when we're in it. Like we, for
Yes.
some reason, have this picture of all the things we can do. Especially, I remember myself too, as a new mom, you picture what you could do prior to having a child. And then you realize,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I need to throw that out.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I can never do these certain things. It's just, it's not as predictable. And
Mm-hmm.
so it is asking that question. What are the things that I need to be doing right now? What can I let go of? What can I delegate? What can I put on hold? And sometimes things are busy right now. So we have that kind of push pull of, oh my gosh, it's all important. What do I drop? Or do
Yeah.
I drop it? So I
Yeah.
think maybe
It's
asking for support. A lot of people feel like the worthiness issue comes up again. Well, I should be able to do it myself. But
mm-hmm.
really, no, we shouldn't. We
Yeah.
should be able to ask for help.
Mm-hmm. It's that. And I don't know if this is just also a consequence of the time that we're going through right now
Oh,
too. So
yeah.
so my husband and I are both working full time. We're both working from home and we don't have childcare because when Elise was born, she was born December 2019. And by the time she was 3 months old, which is just kind of around when we were starting to look for
Mhm.
childcare and investigate, we shut down because of a
Yeah.
pandemic. So yeah, there's like a lot of questions.
Oh, yeah. And I think really because of the time we're in, because you have a new daughter, and because
Mhm.
certainly this time of being a mom and in her life at this age specifically, it's never going to come again. I think it's really great that you're placing that high value on it. And in terms of getting support for you right now, especially in this environment we're in the world, it's probably more about support for your business. There's some really highly skilled people who are actually doing this type of business that can support people like yourself. I'm here for you to bounce ideas off of course, as well, because we need each other. As we're raising our families and building our businesses, we need each other. And doing
Mhm.
it alone is no fun. And it's not necessary, really,
Mhm.
especially now. We can be more connected because of the online space.
Yeah. Yeah, for
So,
sure.
how do you take these challenging moments that you're like, because it's so great, you're going through it. It's not fun to go through it, but then you're able to pull out some wisdom to share with others. How do you find this translates into the work that you're doing with women?
Mhm. I don't think my struggle is unique. Like I think there's a lot of women out there who, whether they're in a really busy kind of quote unquote traditional job, whether they're entrepreneurs or whether a combination of both, and trying to, be a mom at whatever stage. I'm told that this is just the stage she's in, but I'm also told that no matter what age, they're going through another stage. So I
Oh,
just
yeah.
assume that there will be a stage
Just like
all the
we're
way through.
feeling as adults, right? We're
Yes.
always going through a
Yeah.
stage.
So I don't think my struggle is that unique. And so I think for me, like it always comes back down to like I'm very aware of my high functioning anxiety or what it used to be like. Like I'm definitely much, much better now with all the tools that, I've learned over the years, but I'm very aware of what self-talk is driving, what behavior that I'm choosing.
Mhm.
And I think ultimately that that's what's going to help change how you how you decide everything. So I like to say that our negative self-talk drives, five things, and I like the A B C D E. And so our self-talk will drive our actions. That's A. B is behaviors. C is choices. D is decisions, and E is emotions. And our self-talk will drive all five of those things. And ultimately, those five things dictates kind of how our life is laid out, whether it's like a short day-to-day thing or like a long-term thing. And so being very aware of your self-talk and what you're saying to yourself that is driving those A, B, C, D, E's is what I think helps make the change. If you need to change anything, if that makes any sense. So if you're making choices that you're kind of like, I really don't like this choice, or I'm engaging in behaviors I don't like, I'm feeling emotions that I don't want to feel. A lot of it comes back to our self-talk. And I think the more aware we are of our self-talk, the more you're kind of getting to the root of what's going on.
Absolutely. Do you have stats around what percentage of the time we're saying the same thing over and over to ourselves, or like positive things versus negative things? Do you know? I've heard this before in different places, but certainly I don't remember.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. So first of all, there's some estimates. I think this stat was produced by Dan Gilbert, I think his name is. He's a Harvard researcher, and he estimates that we are pretty much in autopilot mode about 50% of the day, which is basically about 50% of the awake day. Like, he's not counting like the sleeping time. Like, right. Pretty much the majority of the time, we're just going on autopilot, doing things because we've always done them the way we've always done them. The problem with that is, if the way you've always done it is working, then great. Most of us are probably doing some things that we just do because that's how we've always done it, but it's probably not the best way to do it. It's probably, irking us some way or another. We just don't feel like we have the energy to deal with it. So we'd rather not deal with it and just kind of move on and find other systems to like kind of deal with this kind of broken piece that we have in there that, we're doing. The other thing is that, again, it really depends on which source you look at, but a lot of people say we have between 50 to 80,000 thoughts a day. 90% of those are repetitive. So we repeat those thoughts day to day. And of that 90%, 70 to 80% of those are negative thoughts.
Oh my goodness.
Which is absolutely insane. And I don't actually think people realize what constitutes as a negative thought. Because I brought this up earlier, but like, perfectionism is a limiting belief. It is a chronic negative thought pattern. And the reason is that because most people don't sit there being like, I have to be perfect. Some people do. But if you take one step back, and we talked about this earlier, but like, if you take one step back, I'm like, well, why do you feel like you need to be perfect? A lot of it is worrying about what other people will say. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, when I work with women with high functioning anxiety, like, this is a huge one, like needing things to be perfect. And it's interesting because we'll work together and they'll realize very quickly, like, oh yes, I am trying to be perfect because I'm worried about what other people will think of me. But then behind that, even one door behind that, is this worry and fear that if they treat their high functioning anxiety, they'll stop needing to be perfect because they won't care what other people will say. And that somehow equates to doing everything in a sloppy way. Like, they're like, well, what if I don't want to be perfect and I don't care what other people think? And I start handing in presentations that are all over the place and sloppy and full of grammar mistakes and spelling errors and like it's horribly done. And I'm like, that will never actually happen.
Right.
Like, there is a very big difference between sloppy work and being lazy and not caring and nailing every single thing perfectly. And just because you manage that high functioning anxiety, manage that negative self-talk around perfectionism, it doesn't mean you're going to suddenly become sloppy and lazy. Like, that doesn't actually happen. You're just going to do as good of a job, but you're going to be driven from a place of being reasonable with respect to how good of a job, given the resources that you currently have, versus going at it and being perfect because you're worried about what other people might think of you if you're not.
That's such an important distinction. So very often we can go all or nothing. Mm-hmm. And it's that way with various wellness practices and habits as well. If I can't work out 6 days a week for an hour each time and eat the perfect way, like you were talking about too, eat all the perfect foods. If I can't do it, then I'm not even going to start. Mm-hmm. Because
I'm a failure because even right. It's like, and I remember going through this. I'm such a failure that I can't even like do self-care properly.
Wow, right?
I'm not doing self-care properly. I was just trying to do it to the 100th degree. And anybody trying to do perfect self-care is going to end up in a very interesting spot because there's no such thing as perfect self-care. And now suddenly the self-care is stressful.
Well, and it's missing the point of it too.
Yes.
It's care. It's having grace on ourselves. It's slowing down to really look within and look with gratitude. And these are things like we can't do anything perfectly. So if we acknowledge that, if we can instead do it authentically, right? If that can be our focus, it can look different every day. We can be authentically looking back in remembrance at something. We can be authentically excited,
Mhm,
authentically disappointed, and that's okay. We can sit
mhm,
with that feeling and know that,
mhm,
okay, this is a human emotion, and we need to fully experience these things to get through them. Because if we're just trying to, oh, no, have to be happy all the time, then what ends up happening is we push those emotions down, we don't
mhm,
deal with them, and then later
mhm,
on, they come
mhm,
and rear their ugly head.
mhm,
I just love that you talk so much about the power of up leveling the way that we talk to ourselves. It's something I've been passionate about for so many years. We can motivate ourselves, move forward, and do great things by the things we say to ourselves, or we can completely deplete ourselves and just curl up into a ball in the corner by
mm.
what we say to ourselves. So, what does it actually look like when we make a conscious decision to upgrade the way we talk to ourselves? I would love if you have a story you want to share of a client of yours, perhaps, who has worked their way through it. Like, what did it look like in the beginning? And then where are they now after they've not mastered it? Because I don't think we ever fully master it, but they're now honing that practice of positive affirmations and self talk.
One of the things that I always say is at the end of working with a client, I hope that they're able, I work with a lot of professional women. And so I say, like, at the end of us working together, my hope for you is to be able to lead fearlessly, love fully, and live authentically. That's what I hope for
Yeah.
you to be able to do. I've had women who were so worried about not being able to succeed in something or failing and assuming that they weren't going to be able to do it, or if they were going to this in this particular scenario, it was applying for a different job, they were worried about what is my current manager going to think of me. They've helped me so much. If I tell them I want to switch a job, what do they think? I'm going to be not grateful? Do they think I don't like it here? The stress of doing that made her not be able to sleep. Will I even, like, what if I tell them I need a reference, but then I don't even get the job? Then they're going to know that I applied and wanted to leave, but I didn't get it. And now what are they going to think of me? Are they going to treat me poorly? Am I going to be cut off my um, opportunities in the future? And then what if I go for this interview and I'm so nervous, I do really badly? And I could go on for all these questions. And then she was like, I really want to do this because I think it's my dream job, but now, like, I just can't. Like, I'm so anxious from doing it, and and so when we worked through everything, all the negative self-talk, and even just in that one scenario, there was probably about 10 or 15 things that were negative self-talk
Wow.
related that was in that. And so once we worked through it, she applied for the job, told her manager, she slept the night before interview, didn't even she was just kind of like, oh, I need to sleep because I need to be well rested. Didn't affect her. She went for the interview, nailed it, got the new job, and is literally now super happy because she's like, it's the dream job that I've always wanted. And I feel so happy that I was able to do that without all the stress that would have come from it, and probably just wearing herself out from the stress. Another client that I recently finished working with, she actually went through a really bad relationship breakup, developed all sorts of really um, unfortunate kind of negative self-talk around her body, how worthy she was, and it all came down to her body and what she could, how she looked. um, and it's not just her first relationship that she's had issues with. And when we first worked together, it dawned on her that I was able to kind of look at all of her past relationships and kind of work out that there was a lot of negative self-talk patterns
Mhm.
that ended up, unbeknownst to her, continuously recreating the same relationships. Slightly different, but similar patterns of relationships. And once we did that, and then she was just like, she hadn't dated for 3 years because she was just so disillusioned by the whole relationship thing. She was just like, she felt like she was destined not to find somebody. She wasn't going to be with somebody that she liked. She, will never find the love that she wanted to have. And there's all sorts of things. And we again worked through everything. And this was probably about a month ago, and she messaged me one day to tell me that she went on a virtual date for the first, well, virtual dates new for many
Yeah.
people. So, but her point was like, it's two big things for her. One, she went on a date for the first time in 3 years, and she actually really enjoyed herself. And she went home, not second guessing how it went, not worrying about whether that person was going to call her or message her or whatever. She just totally took a step back and was like, I enjoyed my time. if this works out, great. If there's a second date, great. If not, I'm just going to meet someone else and that is okay. Like she was just so free of all the burden. So that was the first news. And then obviously for somebody who's scared of dating, doing it virtually is like a whole other layer onto it. And so she was so proud of herself. And I just felt so good. Even if the relationship doesn't work out, it's the fact that she now has the courage to go seek something that she wants in her life and acknowledge the thought patterns that kind of kept repeating for herself before. And now she was just like so relieved. I think the happiest thing for her, aside from the fact that she went out and actually did the virtual date, like put herself quote unquote out there, because that's what it felt like for her, was that when she stepped away, she didn't do any of those things that end up sabotaging relationships. Like she didn't worry, she didn't like message to like check in to see how the date went. Like she just didn't do any of those things. She was so sure of herself that she was just like, I need to evaluate whether this person's a good fit for me. So I'm okay with like taking a step back and just kind of be like, well, if there's a second date, maybe if I feel like it, I'll reach out. If not, and they don't reach out, no problem. That person wasn't meant for me. I'm okay with it. Like she was just so calm about it. And she was like, I'm just going to go sign up for the next date and we'll just see how things go from there,
I love it. People need to hear this. The thoughts that play out in our head that we fear, and then what can actually happen when we start to work through things with a rational view of what's possible. Because often our thoughts that hold us back and those negative things are very irrational. Because when you really break it down, would that really happen? Maybe 0.001% of the time. And even if it did, that's okay. Because, life and relationships and work are not perfect. But knowing that, let's just get creative and move past some of these fears and see what happens. And how beautiful that you're there to hold their hand through the process. So they're not doing it alone. Because I think that is where we can really get stopped up. We get these big emotions and thoughts and future forward focused ideas in our mind, and nobody knows but us. And it's just like repeating over and over, but then talking about it, which is the beauty of any kind of coaching, is you have someone to reflect back to you what you're saying, and also to remind you of who you really are, what is possible, and that it's okay to feel this way. And that just gives us a release.
I think something you said made a lot of sense, is future forward thinking. We love taking things that happened in the past and automatically extrapolate them into the future, thinking that it's always going to repeat. And I will say it will repeat if you don't address what caused that to begin with.
Right.
But if you take that step and go, wait a minute, I mean, this sounds really cheesy, but like tomorrow's unwritten, nothing has to repeat itself. If I can do something about it and try to do something about it. And even in the example, like even with as unpredictable as having a baby is, tomorrow doesn't have to feel this hectic and this stressed out for me. I can make the conscious effort to be like, what is within my control to change for that outcome, for tomorrow, for that future that has yet to be written. And 99.99% of that time, that control is what I think is going to happen, needs to happen, how I need to behave, how I need to act. Right. So today I have the choice of, like you said, getting online, hiring a VA. I can get online and tell the person that is my web developer, hey, listen, like I'm delaying this. It's on me. If you want to get paid the rest of your, whatever it is on completion, because a lot of times when you work with web developers, it's you pay half and then you pay the other half. I'm happy to just pay you the other half because it's my delay. But I have that choice too. That way I'm not holding up the other person and I'm just being like, I actually like can't right now, but I'm happy to just pay you. And then we can put this on hold until next week even, right? Like that is still a choice that I have. And that choice is related to how I talk to myself. Can I do this? Should I do this? But again, I can rewrite a completely different future for tomorrow.
Absolutely. Oh, this is so good. If we can get our minds around this, imagine the things that we can do in our lives. But it's not just about like how much can we add up on our achieved list. It's really how much more can we enjoy the moment that we're in right now, and then the next moment, and tomorrow, and the next day, finding that joy that we can show up and be a blessing and just show up as a higher version of ourselves instead of the stressed out one that often can come up when we're feeling these anxious thoughts. You recently shared sometimes slowing down and being intentional can be the highest form of self care. And I love this because I've been saying for a while now that self care is way more than a spa day. It really begins with our thoughts and our soul. How do
Mhm.
you typically invite people to slow down? What does that look like? And what are some of your other self care practices as you're needing them, particularly now as a business owner and as a new mom?
Your self care is a toolkit that has different sections in it. There are sections in your toolkit that are going to look like that spa day. And that's okay because that's a form of self care. There's going to be times when self care looks like a piece of chocolate cake, and that is also okay.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
So there's like in the moment self care things. Then there's like another layer, which is kind of taking the time to like go for a walk, things that take more than the 5 minutes, 10 minutes to do. Right. Like there's the you gotta like take some time and kind of be like, I need to go for a half an hour walk. I need to think about where my thoughts are. I need to do whatever, like kind of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Hiring someone, that's a form of self-care too, right? Like that's, one other level. And then there's the deepest level of self-care, which to me is always being like, where am I in my life? What thoughts are going through my mind? And who am I going to ask to help me to take care of that? And I think working with a coach or hiring someone to help you with that is a form of self-care
Mhm.
because you we can get to the point of figuring out some of our thought patterns. It often takes an outside person though to really really nail what those thought patterns
Mhm.
are, um, because they're not involved in the story we tell ourselves. They're not involved in the justifications and the reasons and all that kinds of, and those, it's not that they're not important, but if we get hung up on those, we can't move forward. And it takes
Mhm.
someone on the outside to be able to say, have you noticed that the last 5 of your relationships have this similar pattern? And in that, like what story are you telling yourself? What story are you telling yourself about what's going to happen in the next relationship? And this is when we can start, figuring out those negative thought patterns. And I really do think that it takes someone to help you with that. Even for me, like I've been doing this work for many years, and my area of specialty is negative self-talk. But even then, like I can get myself to a certain point. But I also have people that I reach out to be like, this is the scenario. I think it's this. What am I missing? And
Mm.
very often that person will come back and say, oh, like, are you thinking this? Or did you know that in the last 5 minutes we've talked, we've repeated this word like 6 times? Like, is that something that we're caught on or stuck on or things like that? And yeah, when then you work through those, it disappears.
Yeah. And there's something about when you're hiring a coach, actually taking that step of hiring someone, transferring money to someone that you are committing to doing the work because you're investing in
Mm-hmm.
yourself
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to make a higher priority of that work you do together.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas it's great to have a good friend, a spouse, somebody who we can share these things, but they almost are invested in our current stories also. They know us so well. They
Mm-hmm.
don't want to hurt our feelings, maybe. They
Mm-hmm.
know that we have good intentions. So they're maybe not going to show us or tell us exactly what we need to hear. Whereas someone on the outside can
Mm-hmm.
give us some insights we perhaps have never thought
Mm-hmm.
of before. And we're more invested in that process. And that can short circuit the growth so that we can actually move past
Mm-hmm.
it in a much faster
Mm-hmm.
way. So I love it. I
Payment
think
is the biggest commitment.
value for value, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love the work that you're doing. And I think it's beautiful that you're helping guide women into a higher version of themselves and what they're capable of, and really more joy. That's what it's all about, right? Because we can achieve all of these things, but if we're not happy, what's the point of it?
With women, we often, however we define success, it doesn't really, there's no like, set definitions wherever we have in our head, but like
Mhm.
we chase it down, we check it off a list. But like you said, like ultimately, if you're not healthy and happy and you don't feel all those, and it's not about, like you said, being happy all the time. That's not
Right.
how it works. But if you go to bed at night feeling fulfilled and impactful and passionate, then we're on a good track. But if you go to bed and you're exhausted, you're drained, you're so glad today is over, but you're also like nervous about tomorrow. This is a whole other conversation. Sure, you're successful, but are you enjoying your success? Are you happy?
Ellen, I would love for you to share what's coming up for you next in your offerings and where people can find and follow you.
The best way to get in touch with me is following me on Instagram at The Joy Avenue. I post a lot of things about high functioning anxiety, negative self-talk, self-care, things like that. I would love to share actually with your listeners a little mini guide that I've put together called the 10 steps to stop your negative self-talk, how to break up with your inner mean girl today. If you get in touch with me, what I'm actually hoping to release in the very near future is a program called Achieve Joy. And it's a woman's guide to life with high functioning anxiety. If you're a listener and this is something you're interested in, one, the basic thing is to get a hold of that 10-step guide to stopping negative self-talk, because that's first step. And if you send me a message at The Joy Avenue, I am happy to get you on the first dibs for registration for this course, because I'm going to cap it at a certain amount when I release it for the foundational members.
Wonderful. Ellen, it's been such a pleasure hearing your story and learning more about your work and how you're creating things to really help women move into a more vibrant life. And I look forward to seeing what is next for you.
Thank you so much for taking the time and inviting me on your podcast. I really appreciate that.
Everyone, thank you for listening. Ellen and I would love to know what resonated for you as you listened today. Please let us know by tagging and sharing this episode at Sheila A. Botello and at The Joy Avenue on Instagram. It's such a gift to know what you're thinking, and we love to hear from you as you're seeking to grow and thrive in your life. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for being here with me on the Connect podcast. If you like this episode, please share it with someone you think would enjoy it. Also, if you head over to iTunes to leave a review, I'd be so grateful. Let us know what your favorite parts were and what you'd like to hear more of. It will help us have a greater impact, elevating many more people to grow and succeed together. See you next time.